to the next episode of Thoughts and Discourses on Digital Transformation. Today I'd like to introduce Olga Violett, who's DevOps lead and Agile coach at Cognizant Technologies. Welcome, Olga. How are you?
Thank you. Hi. Long time no see.
Yeah, we've known each other. It's like scary. It's like over a decade now. So, yeah, you want
15
to
years.
introduce. Yeah, it's a long time, and it's amazing how time keeps on marching forward. So, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everybody what you're doing, especially on the Agile coach and the work that you've been doing?
Yes, hi. So my name is Olga Violett. I'm an enterprise agile coach, but I usually just say I'm an agile troublemaker. I focus mostly on large scale implementations and a lot of turnaround. They went agile, doesn't really work. Why is it not working? How to get it working? How to get to that result and values what they were hoping to get originally. Also, I'm focusing really on product development and innovation, which kind of needs to happen. Otherwise, you're just not in this century.
Yeah, we get into a lot of technical. This is what the processes and the steps and really the ceremonies that we're supposed to do as an agile. But a lot of times we don't really talk about the product and the product facing the product pieces on that. So you want to give us some insight on, for product managers, how they're best interface with an agile approach.
Uh, so I'm usually focusing on safe when you have one big product, what you need to implement fast with many teams in the same code base. So you need to have the good technical practices to enable that scaling, that multiple teams can be in the same code base, progressing, creating value at the same time together. And it's very important to have that product focus. There is no such a thing as agile project management. We started to focus on product development because products are persistent. They always deliver value. And we put something small out and then iterate on it to enhance it, to bring it further, to get more footprint, to get more value from the customer and provide it to the customer. And it's a very different mindset what needed for it versus, hey, let's project manage it. That's so temporary, so just a blip on the time frame until products do live long. It's very different. You're gonna make very different decisions if you get to look at systematically that why and who we are making decisions.
Yeah, it tends to be a lot of financial aspects, the difference between product management and project management, as well as teams, because it tends to be if we have a project, we're going to manage it start and finish, and there's going to be a budget, and we're going to have a certain number of people, and after that, everyone expects the project just to disappear and the resources magically get reallocated. And then there tends to be this nightmare about, well, we have another project, but it's starting either a month earlier or a month later. So Fred has to roll off one project, and it never is very seamless between the end of one project and the start of another project. I think one of the benefits of having a product, right, is it just keeps on rolling, right? You do your 2 week sprint after sprint, and it just keeps on rolling on, and you just have this kind of book of work, this backlog. So, do you see businesses adopting this a lot more because of the lack of this stop and start and the friction that causes?
Oh, absolutely. And not just the stop and start, but also stepping away from the constant mandatory context switching penalty. Because if you have somebody working on 2 to 3 projects from that very point, they are not working on anything. They are just spending their time, which is not necessarily the best what we can do with them. Resources are becoming very, very, very constrained, and people becoming very expensive and the most valuable asset for a company. So how can we maximize what we are getting out as a value from the people? How can we keep their spirit high? How can we create an environment where they feel that it's worth to work, worth to come to work. It's not a grind. They are excited when they have that bounce in their movements in the morning that, hey, we're going to have sprint planning today because we delivered something, or we're going to have a demo and let's see how happy the customer is. How to maximize the human side of the thing instead of trying to pinch the pennies to maximize how the resources are being used. Can we focus on how can we create the maximum value? And when you make that shift and you are able to bring the finance people with you, which is very, very funny. Lots of times people don't engage with them. That, oh, this is how we are project managing, this is how we are managing the budgets and so on. If you ever get to talk to a CTO, hey, we should change that model. Can we change this model? And then the CTO buys in and you go with him to the CFO that, hey, can we move to a product financing? We know that how much the people are gonna cost. Can we, instead of attribute the value creation to the buckets of smaller money and report on that value creation against the constant burn what we know it exists? It became simpler and a much more meaningful conversation. And
Yeah,
a lot of organization, I think, skips on that.
right. I couldn't agree more. I was getting told a story by somebody I've known for a long time, and they were saying that, they're trying to do this transition to Agile, and they were going through, and a lot of their projects are still basically waterfall based projects with start and staff, and they were going through their clarity system, their time management system, and their finance person was basically saying, look, here's Fred, and Fred is underallocated. So if we don't fix this, I'll just cut that resource and we'll reallocate that. And basically, that kind of metrics drives me insane because what will end up happening, people will fake it out. Okay, if you're going to penalize me for having a resource underallocated, I'll make sure every single one of my resources is 120% over allocated so I can then justify more headcount and you'll just leave me alone. And so it's
Absolutely. I see that every day on one of my accounts that because they are so minusculely tracking time against utilization that everybody mandatory 120% allocate. Doesn't matter what you are doing, just book it that way. It's mesmerizingly dysfunctional.
Yeah, and people keep on buying into that concept of everyone needs to be fully allocated 8 hours a day. I get into a lot of product management concepts and say, well, people need think time. People, what are you going to do? Have a timesheet that says I spent 2 hours thinking? And then if some oversight person, well, you really need to think for 2 hours. Can you cut it down to 90 minutes? And so you get into this whole how much slack is appropriate for a developer, a senior developer, even a business analyst to think, well, are we doing things the right way? Is there maybe a more efficient way about doing this? And then you get big savings across the whole company versus, everyone just doing this little Lego piece of work.
Yeah. I see that a lot of times that when they shift to this different financing and thinking model, hey, product and value creation, people actually add more than what they otherwise would because they can really associate with the mission. They can see what their contribution is. They can see how they are creating value. Lots of times my developers go home at the night and then next morning they come back and, hey, I was researching this because if we do this, we can do it faster or a different way. I cannot time keep that for them. I cannot put it on the calendar, that motivation, that level of engagement. And as skilled labor becomes very hard to find, we need to start to recognize this and start to treat it differently. This is the most valuable thing what they can do. How can we enable them to do that instead of, hey, you have half an hour unaccounted here. Where should we book it for you? It's like when you spend more time on actually bookkeeping than doing the value, that's so bad. It's like some corporation grow. In the beginning, they have this focus. Yes, startup focuses, and they are much more utilitarian about these things and simplify these types of stuff. And then as they start to grow and the layers get added, it became diluted and people lose that mission. And now we are trying to bring it back. Guys, can we focus? Why are we doing something? How we are doing it? Which are decisions we are making based on something? Because that's again very, very empowering to simplify things. But do you really need to do this particular report? Does anybody make any decisions based on it? Can we think about it differently? How can we get the information out if it matters? And that's
Yeah,
very interesting to see that dance.
right. The other problem that organizations seem to have challenges is once they get one agile team going and they get it and it tends to go well, they start going, okay, we need to build this up and have another agile team. And then you start getting into, well, how are we going to scale all of these agile teams? And there's actually quite a few frameworks. There's probably the top two are safe and less. Can you comment on right which ones you've used and why an organization should use, say, SAFe as an agile framework and what the benefits really come?
So the main ones are less safe, DAD, disciplined agile delivery, and Scrum at scale, maybe. I prefer to use SAFe for that particular reason that their materials are superb. Their training materials and everything. But it's a framework. It's not something that you pick up and rubber stamp that, oh, that team was successful with it. Let's
Right.
just rubber stamp it in and this team gonna be successful. I find that SAFe is extremely successful if you need to scale above 4 teams and if you have a good product alignment. You can create operational SAFe trains too, but that's a slightly different ballgame again. Do you really need to have such a large scale operation
Right.
that warrant building a train and doing the trade-offs for it versus can we bring that closer to home? How can we make it that operations doesn't cost so much? And that's kind of creating those learning virtuous cycles that, hey, if you need to rescue a bad release, then learn from it. It's gonna happen. Only people working gonna make mistakes. People not working never gonna make mistakes. Let's learn from it. Let's celebrate that, hey, we failed, big deal. Yes, it's a bad reputation, whatever happened, but let's move on quickly. Let's move on positively. What did we learn? Which kind of mistakes we're not going to make again? And how can we avoid? How can we create happiness from those failures? It's very important. It's very different angle on the world because I don't think anybody shows up that I'm going to do a crack job today. Like, you don't want those kind of people anyhow hanging around.
Right. And so does the product need or product management need to change significantly to be able to work in a safe mode with agile release trains and being able to look at much more futuristic and having the right roadmaps?
Product management needs to be very significantly understand how different they are from project management, because that's one of the challenges that you no longer owning just a minuscule vision. Even if you are on a big safe train and you are focusing on one sub area as a product owner, you still aligning to a vision, you still aligning to the system. And sometimes you're going to take work which would not be natural to your team in order to enable the train to deliver the fastest value. And that's a very interesting environment. It's really good for polymath. If somebody wants to always learn something new, this is it. This is sexy, cool. This is, hey, I learned something new. I might not be an expert, but I learned something new. And how can you maximize it? It's a very interesting challenge. So yes, product development needs to change, needs to be very comfortable about. I think that really, when you start to get into scaling, it's really about how to collaborate
Right.
in the product management because When you are in small scale, it's easy that there is a lead and the lead just says what to do. But when you go up to the next level, how to enable collaboration, how to enable that people can contribute, but in a collaborative way, because end of the day, somehow it needs to tie together. Otherwise, your system kind of falls apart and splits against each other. Like, is the API versus the ingestion speed, which is more important? Somehow you need to come to place because which one you're going to optimize to. And you need to optimize to it systematically, not in the micro environment, which is very important. That you need to be comfortable not knowing everything, but knowing enough and mentally curious to understand at least the high level pictures in the other so you can back into better decisions.
Yeah, that's I think one of the complex issues that people run into is people think, well, with Agile, I don't need to know anything. I can just start coding, and and we go, no, that's not it. And I think that's where a lot of projects run into failures. There's a balance between we need to have some high level backlog of what we're going to do, and we need to be able to chunk it up in certain areas, but we do actually need to have some details. And the idea is kind of always like a funnel where the further down the funnel to closer to doing the work, the more details and more information you need. And that's kind of the art of getting the stories and the information and epics in the right order so you can actually keep the team busy and as efficient as possible.
Yes, and that's where it really comes in that efficiency is differently measured. It's not how much your fingers are on the keyboard. It became how much value together you create, which is very, very, very different. And the other thing is having that vision, having that vision so you can create your smaller missions and you can create your smaller wins from it, which really uplifting and changes. Agile is extremely intimidating if you don't like to expose yourself to that constant learning and the opportunity to make decisions. If you just want to be sitting back and just tell me what to do, Agile is not for you.
All
If
right.
you want to bring your brain to work, Agile is for you.
Yeah, that's where it gets into people as being valuable assets, right? And really with Agile, we're looking for people who can actually think and maybe have multiple roles or multiple skill sets. And so we're moved away from you've got a Java developer, a JavaScript developer, you've got a database developer, you've got an infrastructure, 5 teams, one that sets up the server, one that sets up the middleware, one that sets up the database, etc., etc. It seems now everything is code. And so a lot of these developers are tending to having to wear multiple hats. You might do some Java, you might do some JavaScript, you might actually do some Terraform. You might need to have some hands-on skills on looking at security, for example. That's always one of my bugaboos. Making sure that developers think from a security perspective. Are you seeing the same thing?
All across the board. And it's very interesting that when you hire somebody for an agile team, you want to get generic people. You want to get people who good enough and what they know they can apply it in different spaces without too much interlay. Lots of times we still have the specialization. Somebody is a database developer, but if the work flow differently and you need to do some database work, can somebody else do it if the database developer not available? Or do you need to wait and create a bottleneck around the database developer? I long time ago, I worked on a release train where we had 180 developers, and the database team just could not keep up with all the needs of the other teams. And it was eye-opening for them. I was forcing them to honestly say what fits into their sprints for the PI planning. And after the team started to see that nothing fit what they wanted, we started to have a very different discussion that teams, can you take something and just use the database team as an SME for any of the opportunities for this type of rearrangement of the work? overnight the teams rearranged their work and they created a comfortable buffer so they were able to deliver. They weren't comfortable as database developers, but they had that support, which was lighter weight than if they need to wait for the database person to be available, or the database team, in this case, to be available. But this was an extreme example. Nowadays, we don't build the really strange so big. Nowadays, we around 125, we start to get like very antsy. We learned from our mistakes and we evolved. We make smaller trains, but enable them and make them more nimble. But back then, we used to have big trains because we transitioned from big monolithic environments into this new gradual incremental releases and so on. And it was just the lay of the land.
The other aspect that I see going on with people as valuable assets is it's really been fast tracked with COVID. Is the ability to hire anywhere, say in the U.S., right? And I've worked for a couple of organizations and that were very strict about, well, you need to be within 50, 60 miles of work. You need to get into work at least 4 or 5 days a week, and that was that. And there was a lot of inflexible rules. Suddenly with COVID, most companies are realizing, we've worked remotely for a year. We've gone through this pain. We all understand how to use the Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams. We've got a whole bunch of collaboration. So we've got these, digital whiteboards such as Miro, and tools like that now. We're all talking about, well, if we go back to the office, we don't actually want to use a whiteboard. We want to use Miro because it's much more efficient as a collaboration tool. And so all of a sudden now we're saying, well, we can hire anywhere we want, right? Within reason, right? So let's pick within geographic. So I was always competing, right? I'm in the New York market, so I was always competing against, either the fintechs, the established banks, Google, Facebook. Now, if I look across the U.S., right, I can go to other areas where, that have a lot of technical talent that, there's not as much competition, hopefully, such as Dallas or, the Midwest area overall. Are you seeing other companies adopting that same style of, hey, we can start to open up the talent base from wherever region is I am to across the US or across the globe?
I see and I hope that lots of them do, but I see that some of them don't. And those who doesn't do, not gonna end up in a good place post-COVID because they're gonna stay the dinosaurs in the local market, treating people in a way that I need to hold your hand until you are in the office. And yes, I want you to waste your time on commute daily, at least 4 hours, because that's good for me. No, anybody who is evolving, gonna go more to the flexible model, gonna move to, actually, it's for me cheaper to tool people in the right ways because Miro and the digital whiteboards, any of these tools, if you set up the environment, it's not that expensive if you set it up properly. But what you get on your employee satisfaction and engagement scores, it's gonna be much higher. And you're gonna get to a place that you need to do this other ways. You're not gonna be able to source your team, and you need to become flexible, and you need to find different management models and different value models to support, because you cannot really measure anymore productivity. Did this person really sit in the office for 8 hours?
Right.
How are you gonna measure brain work? It's not how much hours they had front of the keyboard. It's really how much value they created. And if you can realign to that and create missions which is challenging for the teams but still realistic, you're gonna have a much better result and you're gonna have a much more exponential return on the investment. But it's very hard to explain this and convince traditional managers that it's actually good for you.
Right. And then the other thing that seems to be really impacting is that there's enough advancement in technology so that people don't need to be super skilled and super technical. So there's a lot of these low code, some of them called no code applications, and it's surprising nowadays, right? If you even look at Microsoft's Power Apps, probably the largest, well known of the low code platforms, you can actually achieve quite a lot very quickly with some of these low code platforms, especially if you stay within these constraints that the platforms have. Of course, if you go outside the constraints, it gets a lot more costly and a lot more difficult. But a lot of companies, if you stay within these constraints, you can actually find good talent and you actually achieve a lot faster. Are you seeing companies really starting to endorse these low code for certain types of problems?
Oh, absolutely. They really see the value in it. And actually, good companies really hire for ability, not necessarily for a particular skill set, because skills you can train. How long does it gonna take you to train somebody that use this new platform differently? A week?
Right.
How long does it gonna cost you to hire somebody? Gonna cost you more, 2 to 3 months of RTE, full-time RTE effort to hire somebody in new. Would it be better if you already have somebody who has some of the business knowledge to skill it up? And that's an evolution. And then people start to feel that, hey, this company vested in me. So I'm gonna have a different attitude toward the company because I have a future. I don't exactly know every single step coming, but can I associate with this company differently than, hey, this is just a gig. Next. It's a very different mindset and a very different angle on on the entire agile transformation, because you want to get to that flexible mindset place where it's a growth mindset. You can always improve, you can always learn new things. Do you really need to know today what's gonna be next month, or is it enough to know what's gonna be tomorrow?
Right. Yeah,
Find those smaller wins.
right, and I've seen some companies be very successful with it, taking some of the, especially mainframe developers, as they slowly but surely get off mainframe and retrain them up on some of the low code platforms because their knowledge is not necessarily in COBOL, but their knowledge is in how the business actually operates, and it's all of these minor business rules that always gets every in a large project because somebody goes, oh yeah, that was a rule we added, and here's the reason we added it and the logic for that, and they have this tremendous depth of knowledge that unless you actually went back to the COBOL code and read or whatever previous language it was, you might read it and you might understand it, but you might not have the background to be able to translate that going forward to say, well, that was done for a customer and we lost that customer 5 years ago, but we've maintained the code. And now you go, well, maybe as we move to a different solution, we don't need to implement these kind of requirements. So I see that
Exactly.
kind of.
All those unknown assumptions, which always catches us.
Yeah. There's the unknown assumptions that always comes back to bite us in big projects. So I always recommend when doing an agile project, we got to leave some slack, right? So rather than just try and hit everybody at maximum number of stories, do you have some guiding principles on the amount of slack that you leave in a sprint so people can do other work?
Yes, usually in SAFe, we suggest to try to load the system around 80%. And if you're familiar with SAFe, we have our sprints and we have a product increment or program increment, or whichever way today's language goes with it. Sorry, I'm an old SAFer. So in the BI time period, we also allocate one sprint, what we call the IP sprint. We make space for innovation, which means we run hackathons, podathons, just ideation sessions, whatever. We play with it, we create that happiness. We also allocate that time to prepare for the next increment. And also, we leave some slack time there to catch up, to kill tech debt if accidentally somewhere we collected some, because when you start new, fresh for a SAFe implementation, it's very easy to set the rules and the disciplines up in a way that hey, we're not gonna collect tech debt. But in real life, you here and there, you will not be able to do something in the proper way, and you're gonna create tech debt. If you don't have payback strategy, it's gonna kill you. It's gonna be so much more expensive to keep the system alive than allocating time for the team. That hey, here is your game time. Here you can go back and fix that if this is the right time to fix.
Yeah,
And we find that creates more predictability actually and much more alignment because it creates a sustainable load instead of the traditional that oh, a release is coming, so everybody is all hands on deck all night, and then next 2 days nobody can really show up on getting up and in. So it's kind of something for something.
yeah. The other thing I see is it's done very well normally in consumer products, especially when you use an agency. There's these ideation sessions, and there's a lot of POCs or testing the market. And even as you're iterating over the product, they might spin up another POC to test the market in certain areas. Tends to be with B2B projects or internal projects. There's not that much ideation of what do people really need. Not that much focus on user interface or user experience, and certainly not enough POCs. Do you see the same thing? And how do you get companies to move into let's do a POC for this for an internal project or a B2B project?
I usually try to really piggyback on okay, this is how you had it. Do you want to really implement it the same way, or can we do it somehow better? And then comes the discussion, what is that better really mean? And maybe we should ask the customer, what should it be really that better, and who is the customer? And a lot of times that's when you discover that the teams don't even understand who is their customer anymore. They never met with them, they never observed them, and then you can create that environment that hey, let's go and see them working for us. And we did this once in a large finance company, and the developer came back. Oh, no, I understand why they don't like our system. They need to click 6 times to be able to enter one data. Guess what? I really would like to bring the data front in the front. Can I? Of course. Why not? And those kind of conversation, because developers really seeing the problem on their own eyes and experiencing it on their own hand gonna make them make much better decisions. How to create that environment that it's not loosey goosey and everybody is out there and just playing around, but we bring those learnings in and loop those learnings in. How to use design thinking, how to do surveying. I worked actually an account where I had nothing to do with software development, but we did innovation. And with the software development mindset, I was like, okay, here is the geek in the chocolate factory. What we gonna do now? It's gonna be interesting. And very quickly, I was able to step into it. That how can we get the product very quick to the customer hands and get that fit? Hey, we have this wonderful platform of Amazon. Can we sell it on Amazon and get real feedback instead of running other tests and surveys and ask the wrong questions? And why are we asking 40 questions? Maybe that's why people don't even answer any of the questions. So how can we get down to 4 or 5 questions? But what are those right questions so we can make business decision based on it? It was such an eye-opening and fantastic experience, especially because I'm in IT. Doing this on a customer product, it's very different, but the same way the concepts are the same. Why couldn't you do it?
Yeah, it's I couldn't agree more. The other interesting thing that seems to be happening is it's now such a coined term, minimal viable product. Everyone just kind of throws it out, and I actually have started to use minimal happy product because you can give somebody to somebody, but if they look at it and go, well, there's just not the features, right? Then I'm just not going to go use it, right? There's going to be something that's got to make me happy to want to use it. And that gets into one of the taglines I've always had is I want to take the customers from being satisfied to being delighted, right? And I think this is the change in focus that starting to see in the industry is not necessarily the viable product, but one that's really going to change people's minds and make them happy to want to actually use whatever you're offering, whether it's B2B, B2C. Do you see the same thing? Do you see that a trap that we fall into?
Absolutely. I'm literally fighting on one of my accounts with the leads that this is all great. We're going to migrate this system into this system. But what's going to trigger people to touch the new system? Oh, we're going to tell them to touch it. Okay, if you're going to tell them to touch it, they're not going to touch it for 2 years. How can we get them to touch it tomorrow? Oh, how can we get to that point that we are providing them something new in the new system that it's worth it for them to touch? And then we can build out the rest of the system, but all of a sudden, one thing what they cannot do in the old system, can we do it in the new system? Because for some reason, the user needs to tolerate that they have two systems and they need to choose between the two systems, which one to start to use and when. And how to build that gradually that for more and more stuff, they are coming to the new system until one day they can just like, I haven't logged into the old system in a year. Do we still need the old system? Because otherwise you're going to do feature parity. By the time you implement it, the market moved. You
Right.
don't need those features. You need very different features. And what's valuable is it's moved on you on top of it.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
people,
kind of very
yeah,
interesting dance.
right. And people's expectations have moved as well. The table stakes over time just seems to raise. If you were to go build something 5 years ago, what people would expect it very different than what they expect now, just because the market's moving all around you, and everything gets higher and higher expectations. One of the other things that I love talking about, because it's such a learning experience, and I was talking to Mark Miller, who wrote or the editor of Epic Failures and DevSecOps series of books. So I love asking this question. You don't need to name names, but do you have some epic failures in Agile and Safe? And what would be the lessons learned that you'd suggest people? And that's, how would people avoid some of the failures in Agile and then in Safe?
Um, I see two type of failures pretty often. One, when they take it for granted that the train is going and it's going well, and then they just stop chipping away from what makes it work. We always talk about that Agile and Safe, particularly, it's a meme effect.
Right.
There is a whole bunch of stuff, and X amount of stuff needs to be there to make it work. But what's that X amount of stuff really in your particular context? It could be different. But I get like my heart bleeding when I see that they decide they don't need the if sprint. They are doing fantastic. And then all of a sudden, people became just like, I'm just hitting the keyboard, productivity drops, quality goes bad, and nobody is inspired to, they don't have that spark anymore. What happened? What went wrong? Let's go back to the basic and bring it back. Another type of failure when people are like coming, especially from waterfall, oh, safe. Let's do safe so I can build a bigger castle. I'm gonna put this project, this project, this project, this project on the train. All a big nice train. No relationship between the verbs on the train. So why would you pay the duty of orchestrating a train when you absolutely don't need to do that?
Right.
And that alignment and because the finance model we need to stay project. Okay, but do you really need a release train for it? And it became like a lightning rod for castle build. Oh, I just need to get the train going, so I have 125 people. I'm gonna be the best whatever manager. And it's like, I really need to do that.
Yeah, you get it. I've been involved in, it makes some very good PowerPoint, but it's completely useless where people are trying to do agile trains on completely separate applications, and it's like, no, 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 you don't understand. This is all supposed to build up into one solution for the customer. If you've got a separate project doing agile over here and a separate project doing agile over here, and nothing comes together, then don't do a safe and don't do an agile train, a release train, because there's no point. You're just going to jump into having issues. I just I couldn't agree more with that one. Any other insights on maybe agile coach is the other one I see, especially since it must be near and dear to your heart. I love companies that bring in a coach and then after a month go, well, we're now all agile experts. Thank you very much, Olga. We're good to go after a month worth of coaching, and you disappear, and things tend to run awry quickly. Do you see the same thing, or do you get called back?
Oh dear, I do get called back a lot. Bad budgeting and other exercises. I really see coaching more like a Nanny McPhee type of thing, that when they don't want you, you need to be there. And when they start to feel that they want you around, that's when time to go, which is very interesting because it's kind of counterintuitive a little bit. But I don't mind to keep in touch long term, but not necessarily do the everyday operations as a lead coach on something, because sometimes, hey, you guys have more DevOps challenges. I have a DevOps guru coach. Why don't we rotate him in for a couple of months? I'm just on the program level. So there is a lot of way to handle these kind of challenges, but companies need to understand coaching is really a support for learning. Not they remove the coach, they stop learning.
Right.
But also they need to understand that a coach is not the same as another coach. Each coach has their own experiences, their own biases. And especially in the beginning, if you never had an agile coach, how do you know that you are hiring a good coach? And who is a good coach for you?
Right.
Somebody who gets your product going, somebody who gets your teams going, somebody who is funny, somebody who gets your tools in order. What is a good coach looks like for you? And very hard to hire for that if you never had the experience.
Right.
So how do you gonna go and learn? And you cannot really go and learn that, hey, I pick up Lisa Atkins' book. This is how agile teams should be coached. Who can recite this for me that's gonna be a good coach? It's not necessary. It's really how you can find the person who can apply a very wide knowledge in your best benefit. Because you need to be comfortable that the coach sometimes gonna hold up a mirror and you're not gonna be comfortable what you see in the mirror. And then how to have that, okay, pin drop, let's recuperate, let's hug it out, and let's take it forward together. Because I had those experiences when I was keep fighting with the CFO, the CTO, that, hey dude, why you wanna go agile? And let's talk about it. It took me 3 months and lots of Starbucks coffee until I got his buy-in that he finally opened up that they're gonna go into a different kind of financing and their code base looked crappy and the board told them to go agile. I'm like, ping, no, we know what we do. We fix tech debt, we get away,
Right.
we put in the processes for defect triaging, stepping away from triages. And also because you are going this direction, maybe we need to remove the operational cost from the system too. And how can we progress that way and influence the product strategy with it? And it became a very good and successful engagement, but I needed that 3 months to break through with him. And he is brilliant. He was just not really getting why I'm asking and what I'm asking. And again, agile is extremely intimidating because you need to open up everything. There is no point to hide anything.
Yeah,
You need
that's a
to find.
right. It's a huge change for agile, where you actually, it tends to be with waterfall and iterative projects. You want to hide all of the blemishes in a project. With agile, the philosophy is we want to open up and talk about all the blemishes so we can learn. And
Especially in safe, you have a scrum of scrums. When you discuss, I have a problem. All of a sudden, 8 other teams get brave and I have the same problem. All of a sudden, you are like unionized and going against the problem together, and all of a sudden management is gonna jump on it and solve it for you, because if all of my team has this problem, I don't want to deal with it.
Right.
And how to use it for the best. It's just very interesting then.
Okay, well, we're about out of time. So, in the last few minutes, Olga, you want to maybe give some insights about how organizations and companies can actually start to go agile, and what would you recommend with their next few steps as they start to go to agile? And if they are in agile and struggling, what would you recommend?
Ooh. For both cases, my suggestion is really try to nail down why you want to go agile. What is what you expecting to be a different outcome? And don't tell me the output, tell me the outcome. Don't tell me that you're going to have stand-ups. Tell me why do you think you should have stand-ups, and so on. In general, pick up the lingo. Pick up the lingo so you can be a partner to negotiate what agile in your particular environment should mean. Does it mean a Kanban team? Does it mean a product team? Does it mean test and learn? Does it mean that we're gonna go and do innovation sprint? What does it really mean for you? How to align it to that vision, the mission, and then see what is different today, what you would like to really change. Because that's how you can come to a good conversation that why and how should you do it.
Okay. Well, just want to thank you very much, Olga. Really appreciate your insights, or maybe I should call you Nanny McPhee from now on. But great to see you again and hear from you, and hopefully we'll be talking again more. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.